Have you ever wondered what life is truly like for a man who chooses to walk alone not because he has to, but because he wants to? In a world that constantly pushes the idea that happiness comes from being in a relationship, that success is measured by companionship, and that solitude is something to be feared, there exists a different kind of man, a man who has embraced solitude not as a curse, but as a path to strength, self-discovery, and inner peace. Society has conditioned us to believe that a man who lives alone without a girlfriend or a partner must be lonely, miserable, or somehow incomplete. But what if that's not true? What if solitude is not a weakness, but a superpower? What if a man who chooses to walk his own path without relying on someone else for emotional validation is actually stronger, more resilient, and more in tune with himself than most people ever will be? Throughout history, some of the greatest minds, philosophers, warriors, and visionaries have spent long periods of their lives in solitude, not because they were forced to, but because they understood something that many people don't. It's a chance to master yourself, to sharpen your mind, to live with discipline, and to become the kind of man who doesn't need external validation to feel whole. The ancient Stoics, great thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, believed that the key to happiness wasn't found in relationships, wealth, or status, but in self-mastery, in being completely in control of your own mind, emotions, and actions. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. This isn't about bashing relationships or saying that having a partner is a bad thing. It's about understanding the deep wisdom that comes from standing on your own 2 feet without depending on anyone else for your happiness. Because the truth is, a man who learns to thrive in solitude is a man who is truly free, and freedom, according to the Stoics, is the foundation of a powerful and meaningful life. So if you've ever felt like you're different for choosing a path of independence, if you've ever questioned whether living alone means you're missing out on something, or if you simply want to understand the deeper strength that comes with solitude, stick around. You're about to discover 7 powerful truths about the man who walks alone, truths that will challenge the way you see solitude and might just change the way you see yourself. Fact 1. He masters the art of self-sufficiency. There's a certain kind of strength that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself for everything. Most people go through life leaning on others, whether it's for emotional support, financial stability, or simply getting through the day-to-day responsibilities of life. But a man who lives alone doesn't have that luxury. He doesn't have a girlfriend to help manage his emotions, cook meals, or remind him of the little things. He doesn't have a partner to split bills with or someone to rely on when things get tough. And yet, he doesn't see this as a disadvantage, he sees it as an opportunity. When you live alone, you quickly realize that everything is up to you. If you don't cook, you don't eat. If you don't clean, you live in a mess. If you don't pay the bills, no one else is going to cover for you. At first, this can feel overwhelming, but over time, it builds an incredible sense of self-sufficiency. You learn to handle everything from fixing a leaking faucet to planning your finances, because no one is coming to rescue you. This level of independence doesn't just make you capable, it makes you unshakable. Stoic philosophy teaches that a man should be prepared to stand on his own. Seneca once said, "He who is content with the least is the richest," for contentment lies not in luxury but in self-sufficiency. This isn't just about money, it's about mindset. A man who can provide for himself, who doesn't need external validation or constant companionship to feel fulfilled, is truly free. He doesn't depend on someone else to bring him happiness, nor does he feel lost when he's by himself. Think about it, how many people panic at the idea of being alone for too long? How many people feel restless or empty if they don't have someone constantly messaging them, reassuring them, or keeping them company? The modern world is filled with distractions, making solitude feel like a punishment. But the man who embraces self-sufficiency finds something most people never do: peace in his own company. By mastering self-sufficiency, he not only becomes independent in a practical sense, but also mentally and emotionally. He learns that he is enough. He realizes that he doesn't need someone else to complete him because he was never incomplete to begin with. Fact 2. He embraces solitude as a source of strength. Most people fear being alone. They associate solitude with loneliness, with isolation, with something negative. But a man who truly understands himself doesn't just tolerate solitude, he embraces it. He doesn't see it as an empty space that needs to be filled with distractions, social interactions, or meaningless relationships. Instead, he sees it as an opportunity, a chance to think, to reflect, to grow. The Stoics believed that solitude was one of the most powerful tools for self-discovery. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in Meditations, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." In today's world, most people never experience true solitude. They might be physically alone, but their minds are constantly occupied, scrolling through social media, binge-watching shows, texting people just to avoid the silence. A man who understands the power of solitude doesn't run from the silence, he embraces it. He uses it to train his mind, to understand his emotions, to develop mental clarity. Think about the greatest warriors, thinkers, and leaders in history. Many of them spent long periods alone, whether in exile, self-imposed isolation, or deep meditation. They knew that solitude wasn't a weakness, but a tool for sharpening the mind. When you remove the noise of the outside world, you can finally hear your own thoughts. You can reflect on your goals, your purpose, your weaknesses, and your strengths without the influence of others clouding your judgment. A man who lives alone learns to be comfortable in his own presence. He doesn't need distractions to escape himself because he has made peace with his own mind. And that is a rare and powerful thing. Most people chase relationships not because they truly want them, but because they're afraid of what they'll find when they're alone. They don't want to face their thoughts, their insecurities, their fears. But the man who embraces solitude does just that. He confronts himself, he works on himself, and in doing so, he becomes stronger than most. Solitude is not loneliness, it's a tool, a training ground for the mind, a place where a man can strip away the noise of the world and truly understand himself. And a man who understands himself is a man that no one can break. Fact 3. He develops emotional control and inner peace. There's a quiet power in a man who doesn't let his emotions control him. He doesn't react impulsively. He doesn't get easily frustrated, jealous, or desperate for attention. He moves through life with a sense of calm, unshaken by the ups and downs that send most people into emotional chaos. This isn't because he's emotionless, it's because he has learned to master his emotions rather than be mastered by them. Living alone without a girlfriend forces a man to confront himself in ways that most people never do. There's no one to vent to when things go wrong, no one to lean on when life feels overwhelming. He doesn't have the comfort of a partner constantly reassuring him, validating his feelings, or providing emotional support. This might sound like a disadvantage, but in reality, it's a gift. Because when you have no choice but to deal with your emotions on your own, you develop an unshakable level of emotional control. The Stoics believe that true strength comes from within. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. This means that no matter what happens, whether life gets tough, people disappoint you, or things don't go as planned, you are always in control of how you respond. And a man who lives alone learns this lesson deeply, without constant external emotional influences. He becomes the master of his own mind. He doesn't rely on someone else to regulate his emotions, he learns to do it himself. He develops coping mechanisms that make him mentally strong, whether that's through journaling, meditation, working out, or simply sitting with his thoughts instead of running from them. He understands that emotions come and go, but reacting to them impulsively only leads to weakness. Think about how many men lose themselves in relationships because they become emotionally dependent. They let arguments ruin their peace. They become needy for attention, or they struggle to be alone because they've never learned to sit with their own emotions. The man who has embraced solitude doesn't have this problem. He has learned that his peace is his responsibility, and because of that, he carries himself with a level of calm that others admire but rarely understand. Emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about understanding them, processing them, and choosing to respond in a way that aligns with your values and purpose. And when a man masters this, he becomes nearly unbreakable. Fact 4: freedom is a rare thing. In today's world, most people are trapped in debt, in toxic relationships, in jobs they hate, in lifestyles that drain them. They make choices based on what others expect of them rather than what truly makes them happy. But a man who lives alone, without the financial or emotional obligations of a relationship, has something incredibly valuable: freedom. Stoic wisdom teaches that true wealth is not about how much you have but how little you need. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants, and this is exactly what sets a solitary man apart." He understands that financial and mental freedom go hand in hand. Without the expenses that often come with relationships, dates, gifts, vacations, shared financial burdens, he has the opportunity to manage his money with full control. He isn't pressured into spending to impress anyone or maintain a certain image. Instead, he can focus on building wealth, investing in himself, and securing his future. He makes decisions based on logic, not emotional obligation, but financial freedom is only part of it. The real power comes from mental freedom, the ability to make choices without external pressures. A man who lives alone doesn't feel the need to impress anyone, seek approval, or conform to societal expectations. He doesn't have to compromise his dreams, ambitions, or personal growth for the sake of a relationship. He can move cities, change careers, take risks, and live life entirely on his own terms, and that kind of freedom is rare. Most people are constantly weighed down by obligations, whether it's a partner, family expectations, or societal pressure to follow a certain path. But a man who has embraced solitude understands that he is the sole architect of his life. This isn't about avoiding commitment or responsibility, it's about owning your life completely. It's about understanding that the fewer external pressures you have, the more control you have over your time, energy, and future. And when a man realizes that, he steps into a level of power that few ever experience: financial independence, mental clarity, absolute control over his own destiny. That is the freedom of a man who walks alone. And that is a kind of power that no one can take away. Fact 5: he cultivates a deeper sense of purpose. Most people drift through life without ever asking themselves the most important question: what am I here for? They chase relationships, distractions, and temporary pleasures, thinking that happiness comes from external things, money, status, romance. But a man who lives alone, who has embraced solitude, has the rare opportunity to go deeper. Instead of looking outward for meaning, he looks inward. And in doing so, he finds something most never will: a true sense of purpose. When you're constantly surrounded by people, it's easy to lose yourself in the noise. You adapt to their expectations, their habits, their beliefs. You compromise. You give pieces of yourself away in an attempt to fit in, to maintain relationships, to keep the peace. But when you're alone, there is no one to impress, no one to perform for. You're left with nothing but your own thoughts, your own desires, and your own ambitions. And that's where clarity begins. The Stoics believed that a man's highest call was to live with purpose and virtue. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." In other words, decide what kind of man you want to become, then structure your life accordingly. This is something a solitary man understands better than most. With fewer distractions and obligations, he has the time and space to reflect, strategize, and take deliberate action toward his goals. Instead of wasting energy on drama, shallow relationships, or mindless entertainment, he focuses on building himself, his mind, his body, his skills. He dedicates himself to his passions, whether that's mastering a craft, building a business, studying philosophy, or pushing himself physically and mentally. Every day, he wakes up with a mission, not because someone else expects it of him, but because he expects it of himself. Think about the greatest men in history: philosophers, inventors, warriors, leaders. They weren't consumed by the constant need for validation. They were obsessed with their purpose. They spent long hours alone, thinking, working, honing their abilities, and that's exactly what separates an ordinary man from an extraordinary one, the ability to focus deeply on what truly matters. A man without purpose is easily distracted. A man with purpose is unstoppable. And the man who lives alone? He has the greatest advantage of all, the silence and solitude to discover his purpose and pursue it relentlessly. Fact 6. He forms stronger and more meaningful connections. Here is the irony of solitude: the more comfortable you are being alone, the stronger your relationships become. Most people assume that a man who lives without a girlfriend must be isolated, antisocial, or incapable of forming deep connections. But the reality is the opposite. A man who embraces solitude doesn't waste time on shallow relationships. He chooses quality over quantity. In today's world, people are addicted to socializing not because they love connection, but because they fear being alone. They jump from relationship to relationship, fill every moment with small talk and meaningless interactions just to avoid the silence. But a man who has mastered solitude? He doesn't need constant companionship. He doesn't feel the urge to surround himself with people just for the sake of it. Instead, he is selective. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." In other words, don't waste your energy on people who don't add value to your life, and this is exactly how a solitary man approaches relationships. Because he is comfortable on his own, he doesn't chase validation, attention, or approval. He doesn't force connections out of loneliness. Instead, he chooses people based on depth, values, and mutual growth. This applies to friendships, mentors, and even romantic relationships. A man who thrives alone isn't closed off to relationships, he just isn't desperate for them. If he meets someone who aligns with his values, someone who adds depth to his life rather than distraction, he welcomes that connection. But if not, he walks away without hesitation, because he isn't afraid of solitude. And this mindset makes him incredibly attractive and respected. When you're not needy, when you're completely at peace being on your own, people are drawn to you. They can sense that you don't need anything from them, you simply enjoy their company for what it is. This creates authentic, powerful connections free from desperation or superficiality. In a world where people are desperate for attention, the man who doesn't chase it stands out. He commands respect, he cultivates meaningful relationships, and most importantly, he is always in control of his own happiness. Fact 7. He becomes a true Stoic, unshaken by external circumstances. There's something powerful about a man who cannot be shaken by the world around him. He doesn't panic when things go wrong. He doesn't crumble under pressure. He doesn't let other people's opinions, emotions, or expectations dictate his actions. Instead, he moves through life with an unbreakable sense of calm, discipline, and self-assurance. This is what it means to embody true Stoicism. And this is exactly what happens to a man who has mastered solitude. The modern world is chaotic, full of distractions, noise, and constant pressure to conform. Most people spend their lives reacting to bad news, to other people's emotions, to the fear of missing out. But a man who has spent time alone, who has learned to rely only on himself, develops something rare, complete inner stability. Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be." This is the essence of Stoicism, accepting life as it is, without complaint, without fear, without desperation. A man who lives alone learns this lesson deeply. He understands that happiness does not come from relationships, money, or status, it comes from within. He is content with what he has because he knows that external things will always come and go. This makes him immune to the common struggles that affect most people. He doesn't feel desperate for love or companionship because he already has everything he needs within himself. He doesn't stress over breakups, failures, or setbacks because he knows that these are just temporary moments in a much larger journey. He doesn't allow the opinions of others to dictate his choices because he has spent enough time alone to truly understand who he is and what he stands for. A man like this is unshakable. No amount of rejection, hardship, or loneliness can break him because he has already conquered the hardest thing of all, himself. And that is what makes him truly free. Conclusion: the power of living alone according to Stoicism. So what have we learned? The man who lives alone, who walks through life without needing constant validation, without depending on a relationship for happiness, without fearing solitude, is not weak, not lost, not incomplete. In fact, he is the opposite. He is strong, self-sufficient, focused, emotionally stable, financially and mentally free. He chooses quality over quantity in relationships, and most importantly, he is at peace with himself. He is not swayed by the distractions of the modern world, nor is he controlled by his emotions. He is a man of purpose, a man of discipline, a man who truly understands what it means to live by Stoic principles. Does this mean relationships are bad? No. It simply means that a man should never depend on a relationship for his sense of self-worth or happiness. Because the truth is, the most attractive, most powerful, and most successful men are the ones who don't need anyone. They choose to share their life with others only when it adds value. The ancient Stoics taught that freedom and happiness begin with self-sufficiency, that the key to a meaningful life is not found in external pleasures, but in mastering your own mind, emotions, and actions. So if you've ever felt like solitude makes you weak, understand this: the man who learns to thrive alone, that man is unstoppable. Thanks for listening to the end. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more lessons. Until next time. Bye.